I still remember the weight of that first paycheck in my hands. 22 years old, fresh out of college, finally feeling like I had made something of myself. I rushed home that evening, heart pounding with pride, ready to share the news with my family. But when I walked through that front door, my father was already sitting at the kitchen table waiting. In front of him was a piece of paper with a single number written on it, 85%. That moment changed everything between us forever. Before I dive deeper into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you have ever felt like the people closest to you took you for granted, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Stick with me, because what my father said next still echoes in my mind to this day. To understand what happened that evening, I need to take you back to my childhood in Phoenix, Arizona. My name is Carlos, and I grew up in a small 3-bedroom house on the east side of town. For the first 7 years of my life, things were relatively normal. My father, Frank, worked as a plumber, and my mother, Diana, stayed home to take care of me. We were not wealthy, but we had enough. Everything shifted when my brother Marcus was born. From the moment he came into this world, it was like I became invisible. My parents, especially my father, poured every ounce of attention and affection into that baby. I told myself it was normal that newborns needed more care. But as the years passed, the imbalance only grew worse. My father had a phrase he repeated constantly throughout my childhood. "You are the older one. You have to sacrifice for your brother." I heard those words so many times they became branded into my brain. When I was 12, I wanted desperately to join the basketball team at school. I had been practicing for months, shooting hoops at the park until the sun went down. But when I asked my father for the registration fee, he shook his head without hesitation. "We cannot afford that right now," he said. "Your brother needs piano lessons." Marcus took those piano lessons for exactly 2 months before he got bored and quit. The keyboard my parents bought him collected dust in the corner of his room for years, but my chance to play basketball that season was gone forever. This pattern repeated itself over and over. I wore hand-me-down clothes from my cousins, while Marcus always had new outfits for the start of each school year. When Marcus wanted the latest video game console, my father worked overtime to buy it. When I needed new shoes because mine had holes in the soles, I was told to make them last another few months. My mother watched all of this happen. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with something that resembled sympathy in her eyes. But she never spoke up. She never defended me. She simply followed whatever my father decided, as if his word was law in our household. By the time I turned 16, I understood that if I wanted anything in life, I would have to get it myself. I found a job at a pizza shop 3 blocks from our house. The owner, an old Italian man named Giuseppe, paid me $7 an hour to wash dishes, mop floors, and help with deliveries. It was hard work, but every dollar I earned felt like freedom. My father found out about my job within the first week. I thought he might be proud of me for showing initiative. Instead, he sat me down and explained that half of everything I earned would go into the family fund. I did not argue. I told myself this was what responsible family members did. I handed over 50% of my paycheck every 2 weeks, watching my savings grow at half the speed they should have. Meanwhile, Marcus received an allowance of $20 every week just for existing. He never had to work for anything. He never had to sacrifice anything. The rules that applied to me simply did not apply to him. Despite everything, I focused on my education. I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and graduated high school with honors. I earned a scholarship to the local community college, covering most of my tuition for the electrical engineering program. My father did not attend my graduation ceremony. He was too busy driving Marcus across town to buy new sneakers for a party that weekend. I completed my degree in 4 years, working part-time throughout to cover my remaining expenses. When I finally landed a job at the regional power company starting at $42,000 per year, I felt a sense of accomplishment I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had value. I felt like I had proven that I could make something of myself without anyone's help. That evening, I drove home with a smile on my face. I had this naive idea that maybe now, after all these years, my parents would finally see me. Maybe they would finally be proud. Maybe things would change. I could not have been more wrong. When I walked into the house that night, the atmosphere felt different, heavy. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, which was unusual because he typically watched television in the living room after work. My mother stood behind him, her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed on the floor. Neither of them greeted me. "Sit down," my father said, pointing to the chair across from him. I sat, my earlier excitement draining away with each passing second. That was when I noticed the paper in front of him. It was covered in handwritten numbers and calculations. He slid it across the table toward me. "Your brother has been accepted into a private business school in California," my father announced. "It is a prestigious program. This is his chance to make something of himself." I looked at the paper. The numbers made my stomach turn. Tuition, housing, books, living expenses. The total came to roughly $60,000 per year. "Marcus needs this opportunity," my father continued. "And since you now have a real job, you are going to help pay for it." I waited for him to tell me the amount. 10% of my salary, maybe. 20%. Whatever it was, I was prepared to contribute something reasonable. "You will give us 85% of your paycheck each month." The words hung in the air. I must have heard him wrong. 85%, I repeated. "That is correct. The remaining 15% should be enough for you to cover basic expenses. You can continue living here rent-free, so you will not need much." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. 85% of my salary would leave me with roughly $500 per month. After taxes, after everything, I would have almost nothing to show for my work. "Dad, I cannot do that," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need to save money. I need to eventually get my own place, buy a car that actually works, build some kind of future for myself." My father's expression hardened. "Your future can wait. Your brother's future cannot." I tried a different approach. "Marcus dropped out of community college after one semester. He said it was too boring. He has never held a job for more than 2 weeks. How do we know he will actually take this seriously?" My father's face turned red. "You are jealous of your brother. You always have been." "I am not jealous. I am being realistic. Why should I sacrifice everything I have worked for so that Marcus can go to some expensive school when he has never shown any commitment to anything? Because that is what family does," my father shouted, slamming his palm against the table. "I did not raise you to be selfish." I looked at my mother, hoping for some support, some voice of reason. She finally spoke, but her words crushed whatever hope I had left. "Carlos, please. Just do what your father says. Do it for the family." I took a deep breath. For the first time in my entire life, I decided to stand up for myself. I told my father I was willing to contribute, but not 85%. I offered 20%, which I thought was more than generous given the circumstances. I explained that I needed the rest to build my own life, to become truly independent. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He pointed his finger directly at my face. "This is not a negotiation. This is your duty as the eldest son. If you refuse to fulfill your duty, then you are no longer part of this family." I stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." I have never been more serious about anything in my life. That night I went to bed thinking he would calm down by morning. I thought he was just angry that he had spoken in the heat of the moment. Parents say things they do not mean all the time. Surely he would come to his senses. I woke up the next morning to find all of my belongings packed into cardboard boxes sitting on the front porch. The locks on the doors had been changed overnight. I stood there in my pajamas, staring at the only home I had ever known, now closed to me forever. I knocked on the door. My mother opened it a crack just wide enough for me to see her face. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was firm. "Your father has made his decision. You need to go." Over her shoulder I saw Marcus leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed. He had a smirk on his face that I will never forget. "Should have just paid up Big Brother," he said. The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood on that porch for what felt like an eternity, surrounded by boxes containing everything I owned in the world. I had no car. I had barely any money saved. I had nowhere to go. Finally, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person I could think to call. My Aunt Gloria, my mother's younger sister, was the only family member who had ever shown me genuine kindness. When I explained what happened, she told me to come over immediately. She would figure out the rest. I called a taxi. loaded my boxes into the trunk, and watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. Aunt Gloria lived in a modest apartment on the west side of Phoenix. She welcomed me with open arms and a warm meal, asking no questions until I was ready to talk. That night, sitting at her small kitchen table, I told her everything. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. There was sadness in her eyes, but also something else. Recognition. Your father did the same thing to his own sister, she told me. Your grandmother worked 2 jobs to put Frank through trade school. He never paid back a single dollar. He never even thanked her. He just expected it as his right. I realized then that this was not about me. This was a pattern, a cycle of exploitation that had been passed down through generations. The older children were expected to sacrifice everything for the younger ones, and nobody ever questioned whether that was fair. You are breaking that cycle, Aunt Gloria said, squeezing my hand. And I am proud of you for it. I stayed with her for 2 weeks while I figured out my next steps. I found a small studio apartment near my workplace, barely 400 square feet, but it was mine. I bought a second-hand mattress, a folding chair, and a hot plate for cooking. Every night I came home to empty walls and silence, but I also came home to freedom. At work I threw myself into every task with everything I had. I volunteered for extra shifts, asked questions constantly, and studied technical manuals during my lunch breaks. My supervisor noticed my dedication and started giving me more responsibility. Within 6 months, I received my first performance bonus. Around that time, I met Derek. He was a senior technician who had been with the company for almost a decade. We started eating lunch together, and eventually our conversations expanded beyond work.